listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William. Joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be talking about the movie that has been getting a lot of buzz on Netflix, Veronica. Because if you follow any pages that talk about horror movies whatsoever, you've probably seen different articles about how only 1 out of 100 people could finish this movie because it was so scary.
The scariest movie
it was so scary
of all time.
And if what are the other things? It's just about how it's so scary. It's based on a true life story and all that. So there's a lot of people talking about it, which is one of those things where I think does a disservice to horror movies to people that are actually horror movie fans who watch them regularly, because you hear things about how all these different movies are the scariest thing ever. And then if you've watched more than like 3 horror films, you watch it and you're like, whatever.
Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah. And, you know, like there has been a big push on social media. And I don't like, and I'm not trying to knock anybody in this, but the people that I've seen post this stuff, and not that there's different grades, but it's always like the people that like Saw and what I deem like lesser horror movies. So when I see that, it's like, I don't trust you.
Well, too, there's the element of people push the like different horror movies and talk about how things are so scary. And like, was that movie Raw? When it was hitting like the festival circuit, they said that they're handing out barf bags to people in the audience, and I didn't get that whatsoever. But
I mean, there was the one instance in that, I think it was the context of the film. It was more impactful for me as far as that moment being disturbing, as opposed to some other like cannibal movies where it's just like, oh, this is all just whatever, and people are eating people. Like that, the way that the context of it happened in that movie, I can see some audience members really like I told you, even my wife was walking by.
Yeah.
She'd watched most of the movie, but she got it for a minute and was like, oh my God, is, this happening or whatever? I think it is the shock of that film because it is, you're just watching this girl in college for so long.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what the hell? Like it, and then that's definitely what makes things scary is the context sometimes and the buildup and all that.
Well, then like you take that movie, which I have not watched, but you compare it to like some stuff you see in Slither, and it's like, it's nothing.
Or Green Inferno.
Yeah.
Oh, no. We don't talk about Eli Roth. He's poop.
But yeah, it's just like a lot of movies I think get hyped up, and to like Raw, I think the reason that like if it did create that reaction whatsoever, it's because it was initially shown like it can, so it's a little bit different audience.
Oh no.
So I just think a lot of times who is watching these movies and talking about them influences a lot of.
I'm
the
fine
discussion.
with horror movies getting a lot of like social media presence and getting pushed in that genre, because we've seen, obviously like. A movie that's kind of in our genre won Best of the Year for the Oscars. And then you had to Get Out and all that stuff. So it's nice to see those movies get praised. But then again, it's like when you bump a movie up so much, I'm not saying I dislike Veronica, we'll get to that later, but it's just when you get to watch it, it's kind of like, oh.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw like, I think right after we recorded the last double podcast, William, I don't know if it was that day or like 2 days later, they said, hey, surprise, we dropped this Netflix film from one of the directors of Record or Rec and Rec 2. So I went ahead and watched it right away because I was like, I'll at least talk about it. And then all that buzz started coming out. And that's why I posted like a mini review on our Instagram and Facebook, because I wanted to combat all the people saying, oh, it was so scary. Like, I mean, like I basically said, hey, like the Conjuring movies aren't my thing, but it's that type of movie a little bit. And I liked it a little bit better than those. You know what I mean? I liked it better than pretty much all the Blumhouse ghost movies, but it's a decent Netflix film to watch. You know what I mean? Like that's about as good as it is. Like it's good, I think. But
I do really enjoy that Blumhouse had an Oscar-winning movie. Like, it's just kind of funny thing of all these different franchises, and it's like, and Blumhouse had a movie at one.
So you
Oscar.
look
You
at-
can have good success.
well, aren't they? Didn't they also produce the new Benji movie for Netflix? Blumhouse.
Yeah, it just was so weird.
They produced a lot of stuff, and they're going to produce the new Todd McFarlane Spawn film,
which I'm interested in.
But then, like, you have like A24, which is more of like the Oscar bait distributor, and now Blumhouse is the one with the Oscar,
which is funny.
Or I don't know if anything from A24 has won Oscars before, because they released a lot of stuff.
I mean, Lady Bird, I think is.
A24,
which I would like to.
Lady Bird's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but Yeah, so the Oscars, just to recap, so Get Out won for Best Original Screenplay for Jordan Peele, and then Guillermo del Toro won for Best Director
And, like,
for Shape of
everything
Water,
else.
and Best Film for Shape of Water.
And you'd been like a couple other things too. I think
Blade
they were
Runner
nice.
2049, Roger Deakins won Cinematography. Kobe Bryant won for Animated Short Film. So Kobe Bryant has an Oscar before a lot of people.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, Alfred Hitchcock 0. Kobe Bryant 1. And Kobe Bryant's got the 5 NBA championships, so he really owns.
They need to like make a new EGOT when it's like NBA, Oscar.
Well, it's kind of sour grapes.
The BGOT basketball.
Yeah. Well, now
In the Oscar,
now Jordan's gonna have to get involved and go win Best Picture award.
they're make Space Jam
Yeah,
too.
Space Jam.
Which
too.
Space Jam.
But Kobe was supposed to be in that also, wasn't he?
Kobe at that point he would have still been in high school.
No,
like a
Space Jam
sequel.
2. They
I
kept
think it
talking
was
about his-
LeBron James.
Oh, that's what
was
it
who they were
was,
talking
okay.
about because he's more of the
Yeah.
media presence at this point.
Well, he is the media presence. Like,
Yeah, but so
deservingly so though.
before we get to Veronica, we can discuss some things we've been watching. And I know Derek, so you've seen Annihilation, and I've seen Annihilation.
We've all seen Annihilation.
Because we record like the podcast like usually like back to back. We'll record 2 episodes. So on one of the last episodes when Sean had mentioned it, he was the one that seen it. So now all of us had seen Annihilation, the Natalie Portman starring sci-fi film that was directed by Alex Garland, who also directed Ex Machina and wrote 28 Days Later and Sunshine, I believe. And then, according to recent news from Carl Urban, who was in the Dread movie,
You can
he was
always
saying
trust
that
Carl Urban.
he was saying that that Alex Garland actually directed most of Dread too, even though he was only listed as a writer.
Dread is very good.
So it's the new sci-fi film. It was a lot of buzz being thrown around it. It's another movie where I think that people were explaining it or contextualizing it with the wrong movies. So not really spoiling anything. Just saying a lot of people are saying like, oh, it's like Predator meets this.
It was similar to Predator.
Yeah, I didn't want
The
to.
Predator analogy is very fair.
I didn't want to make that comparison because then people think it's like the movie, and it's not really like the movie.
No.
It just has an elements that seem like, oh, they took this little nugget and was inspired by this scene,
Yeah, I
or
would
this like one moment or something.
I would say like the way that I would describe this movie is like it's kind of hard to say because it is very much its own movie, but it has elements of Predator, elements of The Thing, for sure, elements of The Thing, elements of like Stranger Things, because it's kind of like you're in the Upside Down when you go. What's the place called?
The Shimmer.
The Shimmer is kind of essentially like the Upside Down. Everything's so you have all these different it's a melting pot of sci-fi ideas. So it's really hard to sit there, like you said. If you tell somebody it's like the Predator, it's kind of like the Predator or Prometheus meets this and that and all these other things, because it's like while you're still on Earth, you're discovering an entirely new world, and it is. I want to say it is kind of a higher concept on some stuff.
I had watched last time. I'd watched Solaris. Didn't I? Had watched that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is let's see, Tarkovsky. Solaris. What genre or what country is that from? Now I'm already. Is it Russian? Right? Yeah, I think it's a Russian film. So that is basically like some place in space, and it's over this ocean, and I think it's called. I can't remember the name of the. I don't know if it's called The Zone in that, or I think it's called The Zone in Stalker. Anyway, it is this place they can't explain, and like this weird stuff that can't be explained by normal, like human or Earth-based physics,
Yeah.
or like the reality we know. And like some weird stuff happens. So a lot of people talked about it. Drew from that, and that being a sci-fi film. But then I also watched Stalker from the same director, like this past week or two. And that is a lot like Annihilation. So in that film, it is set like in Russia, and things are very dour and kind of, things are nearly in ruins. Like, these people are not well off, and it's this guy getting up to go to work. And basically the look of the film at first is almost like a yellow or sepia looking color, but it's like more yellow tint. And I thought maybe the whole film was stylized like that. And then he is getting a couple guys together that want to go in this place called The Zone. And it is this area that I think appeared possibly maybe after an atomic bomb or something. I can't remember what it was, but something happened, and it made this place called The Zone, and it is this like unexplainable place.
Yeah.
And the government and everything has set up borders around it to stop people from going in, because apparently if you go in a certain place of the zone, like you can get almost like you're wildest desires met, but there's also like dangers in there, and it's almost like a labyrinth. Like you can maybe go in one way, and all of a sudden you're back around to where you were, and it's very unexplainable. But when they go into the zone, suddenly the film's in color. So it is very much like this totally different place, as a different reality on its own, which is very, very much like Annihilation. Like after I had heard the comparisons, but I kept hearing the comparisons to Solaris, which it definitely draws a lot on that. But Stalker, it's a very much like, okay, this is Stalker meets like Predator, you know what I mean? Aliens and all this other stuff where it's just the small elements of those. But yeah, I love the cast in that too.
And that's one thing I actually really enjoyed the cast. Natalie Portman, I think from some stuff, either she's really good or she's like in
Star Wars Episode 2.
But that's not
her fault. That was George Lucas. Or
that was
like
the dialogue.
In Thor, she was just, in my opinion, miscast. I don't think that worked for her. But like in Black Swan,
also
I
Thor's
watched, she was great.
not great. So
No,
you know what I mean?
No, yeah, the first two were not.
They made her play serious against the goofiest looking like wrestling outfit.
Yeah, it doesn't work. But I went into this movie. I was kind of actually pretty excited about it. I don't think it's a bad movie, just for me. And this is something we were kind of about pre-podcast. And I'm not going to get into any spoilers, but toward the end, like, you know, let's say the last 7, 8, like the whatever 10 minutes before the movie's over, there's kind of like where everything just kind of, I guess the climax. If you, people were laughing.
Well,
and it's one of those things where it was, you know, all, because I'm 27, these people are all older than me, and it was kind of like a pretty good melting pot of people there. So it wasn't just like it's like everybody kind of the same reaction. And it's like, that's not what you don't want, like 40-year-old plus people to laugh at the ending of your movie.
Well, I think that,
you know,
some people are fine with it. You know, like in my screening, I told him, the person to the left said like, what the hell was that? And then the other person to the right said, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It was like really blown away by the film. You know what I mean? Like, there is a different.
I didn't have any problem. It just, there's a scene where it's like, what are those little mannequins called? Art class that you model and you draw after. That should not be the ending monster. That's goofy. So outside of that, like, that's what people laughed about. And then outside of that, it was a good movie. But it's just, to me, it's like when you're having the movie and you're having like, this is what you built up to. This is the moment. And then people laugh, you fail.
Well, I think that what happened. Well, that was a movie too where the studio, part of the reason, so in the U.S. and China, it's going to be released theatrically. And I think U.S., Canada, and China. And then the rest of the world is being released via Netflix. And that's because, I think, Sean, you mentioned the prior one, like the studio, they given the director final cut, and which is pretty rare in most cases because the studios go back and reshoot things or recut things. And after they screen the movies, like one of the executives wanted to reshoot the ending and change it. And then the other executive supported Alex Garland, stood behind him. And then they just, since they agreed to keep the ending in there as intended, then the other executive's like, well, screw it. I don't want to lose a bunch of money. Let's sell the distribution rights to Netflix for international and try to recoup some of the money because I think this is going to bomb.
Which is cool that they get that, you know, on Netflix pretty soon. I think it's in March, right?
Yeah, on international. I don't know when I don't know when it's going to come to the U.S., but the main thing I'll just say about it is if somebody has seen the movie like 2001 and said like this is the dumbest shit ever, I hate it, you're not going to like this movie.
Especially the end of it. Like I think the end is more cerebral. Like it's not, they're not fighting the queen bee from Aliens. No. It is more about like, you know, it leaves you with a lot to think about if you want to think about
the ending can be taken more metaphorically than literally.
And there's like lots of, I'd love to talk about this film in spoilers, but we're not going to. But there's certain threads in the movie that they talk about that never or even mentioned. There's like throwaway scenes that are really big plot devices in this movie that they don't ever address. So the movie has its flaws. Overall I liked it. Like up until like the final, the final showdown, whatever you want to call it. Like up until that point, until they got to the lighthouse, like I really enjoyed it. Then there was like a 10-minute period where I was like, this is kind of stupid. And then after that, it's like, okay, now it's just kind of standard, you know, whatever. So there's like, if I had to give it a rating, it's like a 7 or 8 out of 10. But it just, the bad thing is like the movie could have been, in my opinion, so much more than that. They just kind of bumbled up one spot. And it's like, man, if you didn't bumble up that one spot and you kind of kept consistent with what you had all through the movie, then to me it's like,
That's what I was waiting for though, because like 2001, the climax of that, or like Interstellar, which is the more recent film that everybody's like, and that's why that didn't appeal to me, because I'm like, okay, they're kind of just doing 2001. I was waiting for the turn in this film where things got so weird and crazy and broke the standards of what you have seen so far. Yeah. And that's what I got out of the end. You know, that's what they gave you. Yeah. And I could see if you were going down one path and it zigged. I was hoping to get that, and I got it, and I enjoyed it. Like it didn't leave like the same impact as say like 2001 or something like that, but I still really enjoyed that they kind of swung for the fences on that. And
I mean, I think they did, but I just,
and it wasn't like, again, the very like last moments weren't like, didn't totally stick the landing for me. No. But I still like, I don't know what I gave it, but I would give it at least a 9 for sure.
You know, like, I definitely want to watch it again. I definitely want to watch it again.
I definitely want to buy that movie.
And then coming off the heels of like Cloverfield Paradox,
it was
just a much more thought-provoking, well-acted.
Yeah, well, here's the problem with this movie is like, to me, like it does differ from the book, but not that I read the book. I just wouldn't read.
I read all the synopsis, and like the movie is only about 15% of they took about 15% of stuff from the book, like some characters, the basic idea, but then just everything else is different.
Well, there's
just cool.
Yeah, there's some really good visuals in this. There's a military base scene in a pool with a visual that's just friggin' awesome. It's almost, but to me, like, even though I would give it a 7 or 8. I'm kind of maybe just to say 7.5. I would be very hard pressed to tell anybody to go to the theater and watch it. I just think it's one of those things that's like, because the ending is where you get to where either you're going to like it or you're going to get, like me personally, I wasn't mad about it. I was just like, okay, they kind of bumbled it up a little bit. But it's like, I would,
on a high note.
Yeah, I would hate to sit there and say, hey, go pay 20, if you just go by yourself, or you got to take somebody $20 or I couldn't tell you to pay $20.
Well, I think it's one of those movies though that like if it sounds like your bag, it's worth seeing in theaters, and it probably won't be in theaters that much longer.
No.
But if otherwise, like I said, it's just if it's the thing too with a lot of horror movies that turns people off too big time is if you have a movie that can, even if it's not super conventional, if it does things you expect for 3/4 of the movie and then the ending goes in a different direction, that just oftentimes loses people completely.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is a payoff that pays off in spades, and it can make some films like elevate them way past all those other films that stay on that same plane. But sometimes it is a misfire for some people, and it bumps it down. You know what I mean? Where it's like, hey, if you would have played it safe, you would have been above this tier of all these movies. But
I just think, to me, it's like one of those movies where, like, if you liked Prometheus, just if you take out the monsters part for the most part, then you'd probably like, because it's kind of similar to that in certain aspects. There's so many other sci-fi movies that it resembles. Like, it has stuff just like, there's almost some verbatim scenes like Out of the Thing in it, which were really good. And then you have A Call to Predator. There's a lot of stuff in there.
I just like that it is for me pure sci-fi, and it's not just something you call sci-fi where the Predator is a sci-fi action movie, but it's just an enemy they're fighting. You know what I mean? Like, that's the sci-fi part. There's so much more to the world, the shimmer and everything, and I love sci-fi like that. Yeah. So like for me, I was just like in on it.
But I think the thing I really liked about this movie too is it had all-female cast, so it really could have been something. I'm glad they didn't go all out Predator in it, but like, to me, if I had to choose one to watch, just to sit down and watch them picking the Predator, because it's easier.
There's some things too, like you think about, it's like, so why aren't they sending everyone into this shimmer
like
wearing
a whole military?
Why aren't they sending in a large amount of people all wearing like spacesuits and stuff to prevent them from coming in contact with any contagions and blah. So there's things like that that logically you would think like, well, why wouldn't they send them in? Because it's not like,
even in Stranger Things they send them in hazmat suits and upside down.
Yeah, but that's Annihilation. Then briefly, other things we've been watching. I watched some of Jessica Jones season 2 on Netflix. I'm like 4 episodes in. It's not to me as engaging as the first season was so far.
Is Marvel Netflix stuff going down the pooper? Because it kind of seems like nobody's been too hot.
So far, the majority consensus has been that everything except for Iron Fist and Defenders has been good.
Poor old Iron Fist. Everybody hates him, and
it's a show that has really bad fight choreography.
He's the one to kill off in the Defenders too.
Yeah,
if they got to lose a character,
it's bad fight choreography. It's slightly miscast
the Kung Fu
lead character, and then you have something like The Punisher, where it's the most disconnected from all of those, and to be its own thing, which I think that worked better than most of the other shows. But
So Netflix helped produce these. Is this going to be stay on Netflix when the Disney service launches?
I think they'll own I don't know the licensing deals. I would
Yeah.
assume they own a certain number of years of these characters and iterations. But I think like they will taper off and come to an end at some point.
Well, I mean, like I'm just talking about the existing shows. Like, will these seasons that are already produced end up on Disney's net?
I think they'll end up on Netflix though, because Netflix produced.
That's what I thought.
it.
That's what I was wondering. Like, that's almost a bummer for Disney. You know what I mean? Just because it's like, if they want to continue this stuff, do they split their audience, or do they say, hey, if you want to keep watching season 4 of Jessica Jones, you got to watch it on Disney?
I think they would probably want to do what they've done with the movies and have like a phase whatever, and then like bring together all the characters in those arcs and then make new shows.
Yeah, I would say too, though, to be honest, like I don't think Disney right now is too worried about, because like the Netflix shows are kind of like tier 2 or 3 or 4 characters. Like Jessica Jones is the only reason why some of these characters are relevant. Like Luke Cage has been around forever.
I mean, Daredevil and Punisher are definitely tier 2. They're pretty up there.
I always thought they were tier 1.
Yeah,
and then when they told me they were tier 2, I was like, oh, I didn't know.
Well, the
that,
thing
you
too
know?
is like with the
But,
stuff
like-
you've seen in the mainline Marvel films and like the enemies you've seen like Spider-Man and everybody go against, like it would seem to be very anticlimactic after having Spider-Man fight Thanos to then have him go after Frank Castle the Punisher just a dude with guns. So that's why they have the street level characters like
But I
Luke
will
Cage,
say-
Jessica Jones, Daredevil.
Depending on how they do it, you can make it interesting, because it's like if you have the right script and the director, anything's gonna be interesting.
But it's just
you know?
the point is like they relegate some of their characters that don't fit in their current vision for the movies to the Netflix series. And then too, they announced that Jon Favreau, who directed the first Iron Man movie and a bunch of other stuff.
Iron Man 2.
and then he directed
Iron Man 2 did have one cool. He had one cool scene.
Did he do
in
the
Iron Man 2.
Jungle
He
Book?
did the Jungle Book,
which is
and
very
then
good.
He's doing the Lion King.
Yeah, and then he's gonna be producing or show running a Star Wars series for Disney on
I
their
think he's gonna
streaming
help
service.
write and produce and stuff.
So there's been a lot of stuff coming. So yeah, Jessica Jones season 2, like I'll keep watching it just because I've heard that it's still much better than Iron Fist. And a lot of these Netflix Marvel shows are ones I just throw in the background when I'm doing stuff.
Well, I love comic book stuff, but I think I'm going to lean more towards Sean on this. It's like the oversaturation that's going to happen, because there's another Netflix is just cashing out, handing out checks to everybody who's like, you got a comic book, and they get out another one that's like a second tier. I can't even remember the name of the people, but it's they're gonna have to do another comic book show, and it's like at some point there's gonna be so much crap out here that it just, to me, just going to kind of kill it. Like it's going to, the comic book stuff is going to kill itself because there's going to be so much.
I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know if it's going to evolve into something else, and we will start getting like comic movies more like Logan and stuff, like where it will the genre will change. Like it may happen, but you know, like the westerns were the thing forever. But I don't know. I don't know if it was the oversaturation that killed them. I really don't know. I'd be interested to look into that, or if it was just a changing of time.
Yeah, I think the changing times
and taste. Like are times and taste going to change? It doesn't seem like they're going to change within the next few years. Like maybe another decade or so.
I think what would tell us whenever a huge, because DC doesn't know what they're doing, so throw them out. When a MCU movie that's like an Avengers, is like Infinity War comes out and it does bad, or it does like it doesn't break $1 billion, and once you start seeing that, then you know that it's ran out.
Well, I think
as long as
it'll still go for 4 more years.
It'll still go for 4 more years.
I think that a lot of westerns died out because technology. So because westerns were the reliable staple thing. But once technology for filmmaking and special effects got better, once you see Star Wars, it's hard to convince a kid to go back and watch Cowboys and Indians.
I mean, not just that, though, but I think, too, you had the upper echelon of Westerns. Like, you had a lot of Clint Eastwood, like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. You had Butch Cassidy
and
and
Iron Fist.
Yeah, and then what happened was you got so few of them and so many of the Iron Fist ones, it's like, yeah, why am I going to watch this? Because, you know, John Wayne passed away, so that hurt him because that was like the big Western guy. I think Clint Eastwood, toward the end of his career, in the Western stuff, was getting out of it. So you lose these big names. And then you get kind of left with and then, you know, World War II movies were really popular around the same time.
Well, it's just, I think technology, I think filmmaking technology allowed them to progress and say, oh, maybe we don't have to just make 1,000 movies of dudes on horseback.
Yeah. Well,
it's sad to say that one other thing that could change a shift is if there is something, a major worldwide disaster or something, that, you know what I mean, kind of resets
another
like,
war
what
or something.
People like, you know what I mean, like people's opinion, and it like something, all of a sudden there's a cultural and mind shift on certain, you know, just everybody's like worldwide thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, and then it just things maybe change after that. Like
Well, the let's see.
the status quo has changed.
So there's something else. The other thing I watched briefly, I watched season 5 of Bates Motel.
Yeah.
So that was the one that finished off the series and incorporate
Rihanna in that one.
Yeah, Rihanna is Marion Crane. So it had the same. So the show, like, it started out like the first half of the season is kind of just getting you up to the point that the movie started. And obviously Freddie Highmore, the guy that plays Norman Bates, is much younger looking than Norman Bates was in the original movie, as portrayed by Anthony Perkins. But like the back half of the season, like I did enjoy the way that they covered the same timeline and the same story as Psycho, but in a vastly different way. So they had, Norman Bates, and they had there's these iconic moments that you expect to happen in the show. And then it's one of those things where if you just redo this with these different actors on a TV budget and without the same music and everything, it's just going to feel like
Gus Van Saint's.
it's just gonna feel like you're eating like the store brand potato chip that's stale. And then they did something different overall with the story. So I was like, oh, okay. So they subverted expectations, did things a little bit different, and had the ending be a lot different, and had the ending really go beyond the last scenes you saw from Psycho. So it started before the movie and ended after the movie, and did things differently in terms of what it was. And then the character Norman Bates, was in a different place, and so I just enjoyed what they did with season 5. Like, it was a show that I watched when new seasons popped up on Netflix. It wasn't like the top of my queue of things that I had to watch where I would have paid to see it early. But like, it's on Netflix from the first episode to the last one, so I definitely recommend checking it out. It's not really like a slasher show. I mean, there are some deaths in it throughout. It's more about the relationship between Norman Bates and Norma Bates. And then like in the show, he has like a brother and then like an uncle and stuff. So there's different family members that come in.
Oscar
And
Uncle brother Oscar.
There's different people that come in, and like I said, it's not trying to be like MTV Scream or anything like that where they're killing people every episode. There are deaths throughout, but it's, more of a show where if you wanted to see what the relationship between Norman Bates and his mother was, that would have led up to him becoming who he was. I mean, granted, this is an alternate modern timeline versus the original movie occurring in, the time it was set in like the 1960. But so this is set in current day. The technology side of it, like Facebook and stuff like that, really plays almost no role whatsoever in the story. They have like cell phones, and that's kind of the extent of modern technology really encroaching in it.
Was it flip phones or smartphones?
I think they have smartphones. But I mean, it's like this technology portion of it doesn't really matter. It's really just about like the core characters and the relationship. So that's a show I recommend checking out. You can see all of it on Netflix right now.
At some point, we should cover Psycho 2.
Yeah, we need to cover Psycho.
I remember Psycho 2. I remember liking.
Is that the one with Vince Vaughn?
No.
That was the remake.
Okay. There was a Psycho 2 and 3. Anthony Perkins directed. Did you direct part 3 or 2? I don't remember, but I remember liking part 2. I can't remember part 3 really. But speaking of that real quick, I did watch Hitchcock's, I think it's his last film, The Family Plot, with Bruce Dern. It's kind of like a crime. It's a comedy, like crime drama thing. But it's very good and very, very funny. That was on, I think it was on Stars maybe, because they have a ton of Hitchcock stuff on there. Because then I also watched Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Yeah.
I guess the premiere has happened since the last episodes. Watched
Apparently
the first
their
2.
ratings are really down.
Are they? I'm not surprised because there's no buzz about it. They shifted. You know what I mean?
It just kind of got dropped.
I really think this is probably maybe going to be the end.
Well,
because they shouldn't lower the budget.
Because I followed the AV Club because I think you were the one that followed them first. I started reading through you. One of y'all did.
Probably William.
Yeah,
one of y'all.
I usually just read their
they
TV
like
reviews.
apparently their ratings are like down like significantly from last. But I think a lot of it is because they dropped it in a random part, and there was literally no buzz outside of like some Facebook and Instagram ads that targeted.
Because like original seasons, they had Bruce Campbell going on like the late night shows with like Lucy Lawless.
Yeah, I was watching like some live streams before it premiered on season 2,
and he was on like Bruce Campbell was on Colbert.
I would say this would be the last.
So they had like a major push for those prior seasons, and they happen in October when people are hungry for horror content.
Yeah.
And, with that show not being like straight scary horror, just being more like fun and things like that, it's like an alternative to the dour, downbeat Walking Dead. It's like, oh, here's this show.
Which that's down too, so.
And
But-
everything's down because everybody's dropping
Everything.
TV.
but then they waited.
Netflix is it.
But then it's over a year. It's like a year and a half
Yeah.
from the show last premiering.
And it's
to when
not the
new
Game of
one-
Thrones, so it's not.
So they
gonna-
dropped it in early, first quarter February, into February time slot, and didn't have a lot of buzz around it. Like on social media, the only big buzz has been from horror sites. Like, hey, if you want the show to continue, you gotta watch it. So there's that element, and it's just like,
And
hope. I mean,
and I will say I don't think it's there's only been 2 episodes. I don't know where this is going, but so far for me, the quality is there. Like first
Yeah.
episode was good. Like I enjoyed
Well-
it. It wasn't obviously as good as like maybe it was nowhere near as good as the premiere first episode.
well, the Sam Raimi directed.
and then
premiere.
I think I remember liking the season 2 premiere a whole lot too. It was good. This one was good, but as I told you, I almost wish they would just do like we're in a detective club for deadites, and we
Yeah.
just do like a weekly thing. But because it feels like sometimes they're pulling story out to
Yeah,
give
it's
them
your
reasons
last
to do
story.
stuff. But at this point, I'm starting to enjoy what they've pulled out just by the second episode already. So it may pay off. And the second episode has an incredibly funny scene. Like I was laughing out loud. And I'm excited to watch. I haven't watched this week's because today's Sunday. But I'm in. I'm excited to
Yeah.
watch the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, like I've heard Bruce Campbell say too, like if the show ends, there is a possibility to do another movie at some point.
Yeah.
but I think they would have a hard
Crossover.
time. I think they have a hard time convincing a studio that hey, this TV show that didn't hold on to its audience is going to be able to propel a film. But
Yeah.
That's where if you get the right director and
Well, if you get Sam
Or you
Raimi,
or you just have him waking up all of a sudden in an alternate timeline. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's
Or I
Yeah.
think if you could find a way to cross the remake and that together, it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Because the remake was something have we ever covered that for the podcast?
we haven't
Yeah.
reviewed it.
we have it.
No.
we need to
Oh,
do
was
it
that out
sometime.
before we started the site?
Yeah,
Yeah, that came out in 2013.
The only other thing I watched real quick was The Lure. Was that Polish horror musical?
Yeah.
About the mermaids. It's like a retelling of The Little Mermaid. Watched that on the Criterion Filmstruck thing. I heard really good buzz about it. I kept almost renting it last year. I just never did. It's cool. Does some weird stuff, and I really appreciate like just how kind of berserk a little bit of that film is. But at the same time, it just didn't. No pun intended. It didn't hook me.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't even recommend anybody like necessarily going out and renting it because I thought it would be my thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not that I'm huge into musicals, but there's some musicals that I like that are like twisted musicals like this. But it's not bad by any regards, but it was just being a musical in a foreign language. It's like I might like the music, but it's hard to really like dive into it, I think,
Yeah.
because you can't, the lyrics aren't your native language. So it's a weird thing when they're doing a lot of storytelling through that. And maybe that was a disconnect for me, possibly. But visually, it looks pretty cool. Some weird stuff. It's not a bad watch at all. It's just I was waiting for it to be over, and I thought it was going to be something that was going to be right at my alley. So.
Yeah.
Something I was watching, which is weird how I ended up watching this, was Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. The only reason why I ended up watching that, because I kind of want to watch it anyway, but during the Olympics with ice skating, one of the women had ice skated to her theme was a black swan. And then one of the announcers made an obscure, however you say his last name, Aronofsky referencing, not that black swan, the other one. So I was like, okay, I don't know why that made me want to go watch it.
I love that movie.
I really loved it.
That was your first time watching it, right?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Like, it's such a psychological thing, and it's just so interesting to see like the level of madness, because I think a lot of people, regardless of what you do, can relate to that. Especially like, 'cause I love sports, so you watch that and it's like you could see not just people in ballet, but people in all sorts of stuff like that where everything's kind of vain almost, where like it could affect them. And
in the competition, like my wife she danced for like, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so.
and just
so
really
she loved that movie too,
And
I mean, it really is like the wrestler from the dancers world, but psychological
which I've
horror
seen,
film.
which is funny that I watched The Wrestler and I never really even thought about who did. It's like, oh, he did them both.
Yeah.
And it's just funny you can go from doing The Wrestler to something like that, which both are very
Which is
good.
a great evolution, I think.
Well, The Wrestler is a very straightforward movie, and then he's done stuff like The Fountain, so it feels like the Black Swan was like the melding of a straightforward story and all the kind of metaphorical, non-traditional, non-linear, fantastical stuff melded with a straightforward narrative that worked. And that, because he was supposed to be doing the second Wolverine movie, I think. Like at the time he was announced as doing the second Wolverine movie, I think. And then after the success of Black Swan, because people thought it'd be like, you know, a movie that barely made its budget back, and then that was kind of it. But it was a huge hit. And then he realized, like, okay, I don't have to do the studio film now. I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to back out of this Wolverine movie.
I mean, you could see basically his version of Wolverine being Logan almost, but not like the wrestler, like, you know what I mean? Very like,
which would have been
down hero,
which would have been
like
amazing.
That's essentially kind of the same sort of story, like using his body for, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, that's why I was excited for Mother. And Mother is, that's a good point to make William, about how it was a melding of this kind of real life touchstone stuff mixed in with the metaphorical elements and fantastical elements, where Mother almost takes away all the real life stuff.
Yeah, it's all just
all
metaphorical
and fantastical. And I like that movie, but it's not one I'm going to jump back to watching again. Like, I loved Black Swan. Mother, I liked it.
It turned off a lot of general audiences.
But I didn't. Yeah, I'm not head over heels for that film.
My problem is I watched Black Swan and I loved it so much because, like, if I was gonna give that rating, it's like a 9 out of 10, or maybe even 10 out of 10. I don't know. It was pretty awesome. Mother, on the other hand, was like, first of all, I can't take the movie serious anyway because of the title. Because every time we always make fun of the rest of it. Yeah, like that's what I think about. And to me, it's like, after watching movies, like, Aronofsky has his head so far up of his ass that his great grandfather can't even shit.
I mean, well,
it's like, man, that movie is so pretentious.
I'm not trying to be pretentious, but he is an artist. You know, every filmmaker, like,
he's an artist. No, that movie was like, I'm an artiste. But
shut up. At the very least, he is trying to do something else. Like, maybe it was a failure for a lot of people, but he was at least saying, hey, what if I made a movie like this? Because there's not really movies that that I've seen that are too much like that.
I'm gonna put this on the same level as like Hateful Eight, where it's like you watch a movie and it's like you were so far up your own ass, it's ridiculous.
Them trying to push themselves. It doesn't work sometimes.
With Mother too, I think the biggest knock against it was the way that it was sold. Is kind of
it's a movie like you eat caviar and drink champagne.
It's like from the director of Black Swan, starring Katniss Everdeen and Mystique from the X-Men films with Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer. We have a thriller in a house.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't that at all.
No, and it was completely misrepresented. It was the Drive of movie, you know, because Drive was terribly misrepresented. And so you like, I knew, because I listened to podcasts and you all talk about it, I knew what it was. And but anyway,
clarify, Drive was sold as a Fast and the Furious type film, and that not being that pissed a lot of people off and even prompted a lawsuit.
To me, this was sold, if you ask me what I thought it was based on the trailers, it was a kind of like a Conjuring,
Rosemary's Baby is what
some
a lot of
type
people
of
thought,
Rosemary or something like that. And what you got was like, just, in my opinion, like a caviar champagne movie, very pretentious, kind of up your own ass.
But I also found enjoyment in a lot of singular scenes, like when people are sitting on the sink and she's like, "Quit sitting on." Like, I loved all of that.
Yeah,
like,
there is
like the frustration.
Stuff.
Like I liked a lot of that movie. Just, on the whole, it wasn't a complete home run for me.
I enjoyed it, but
like, we were laughing a lot.
I properly calibrated my expectations.
It was a good movie, but it's one of those things where it's like,
performances I think were great.
But to me, it's like, after going from Black Swan, which I think was brilliant, and then you watch this, and it's like, this is the movie. Like, Black Swan is like, I'm gonna compare this to Rocky. Like, Black Swan is like the Rocky 1-2 Rocky, and then this is like Rocky 3, where he's like so far up his own ass he gets beat up by Clubber Lang, and it's like, okay, you went too much, you kind of messed up, you didn't do what you did here, it wasn't as successful.
I think that seeing Black Swan with Natalie Portman, the next big movie is after Noah. Yeah. The next big movie with Jennifer Lawrence, you're like, oh, he's going to do the same thing for her, and he went in a different direction.
Yeah, so. It just wasn't. It just was.
Speaking of which, I want to see Red Sparrow.
I do want to watch that.
And then also, Strangers Pray at Night came out. None of us saw that.
Yeah,
the reviews aren't stellar, but they're not.
So, like, because me and Julie, or Julie and I, to be proper, ordered Movie Pass. We haven't got them in the mail yet, but as soon as I get the Movie Pass in, I plan to start seeing more stuff that I may not want to pay to see otherwise. and then try to get videos or at the very minimum some like Instagram stories or something reviewing.
Can we just
things.
do the critic style where he's painting on like Sean's face really close and he's like, it sucks or whatever,
It stinks.
Yeah, it stinks.
Yeah, so
Do we want to move on to Veronica?
Yeah, let's get
now?
on to
Move on
Veronica.
to
Speaking of it stinks.
Veronica.
And it doesn't.
So Veronica is a movie that just hits in. I don't know if it's everywhere, but in the U.S. it's on Netflix Watch Instant.
If you're into US and
and
everywhere.
it was one of those movies that I hadn't really heard anything about, and then I just saw. Before it came out.
I had it. There was all over like what do you follow on Twitter? 'Cause there's
So-
a bunch of stuff like if you follow like Bloody Disgusting and stuff like that on Twitter, they've talked about it before.
So it was directed by Paco Plaza, who did Wreck and Wreck 2 and Wreck 3, and
Rec 4, Rec 5.
and 2 just to
Wreck-It
get
Ralph.
and to get it
what I
right
was thinking
to
of.
get it right out of the gate. It is Spanish language film with subtitles.
Yeah.
So it is not in English.
Yeah, which is
they're-
whatever.
I don't know if they do the dubbing on it because I know some of the movies like Dark or the series Dark they had dubbing
Mm-hmm.
for it. I don't think they did dubbing for this. I would recommend just watching with the subtitles because to me that always
Yeah,
works
I
so
mean,
much
And you
better.
can change it. You can go in there and look. Like Dark, I think started out with a dub, and you could go manually change that back to
Yeah, subtitles. Some people will complain about it. It doesn't bother me. I sometimes it is kind of nice to like see a movie like that in its native language. It's just like if it's
Well, the other thing,
read,
that's-
it's
the
not
other
big
thing
deal.
that subtitles do to me is it makes me put the phone down and watch
you have
it.
to say engross in the film to unless if you know the language, then you know. I
And
don't.
two, like we'll do mostly like spoiler free and just hold the spoilers to the very end. I mean, this is
There's
so
not
just
many
to lay it
spoilers,
out.
it
This
is.
is a movie where a character, just the basic threadbare amount of information you know to watch it is that a young girl and her friends play with a Ouija board
Sentinel was a better movie.
during an eclipse, trying to talk to her deceased father. And things don't go as expected, and she becomes haunted after that. So that's really all you need to know.
If you've seen The Sentinel, which is like a 1970s movie about a woman who lives in the gateway to hell, this movie is very similar to that, but nowhere near as good. And it does not have Jeff Goldblum in it.
And
so.
you have a movie that very much fits into the realm of your Conjuring type. Like this movie, like watching it, not really reading anything about it beforehand. I was like, oh, will like a supernatural paranormal investigator show up at some point? And no, there's not. It's just a character's journey.
And the Blumhouse comparison, like this seems like straight up in their wheelhouse,
Yeah.
And not to say they own that genre, but in the recent years, as far as box office goes, they have owned that genre.
Yeah,
Well,
they have.
Mostly.
And two, if you go into this movie expecting it to be kind of like Insidious, where an Elise will show up, or The Conjuring, where the Warrens show up, it's not that.
Well, here's what I liked
And
about
if you
it. Like,
expected a lot of scares, you only get like 2. So
Yeah.
don't expect
But
much
there are
on that
people
end
who
either.
are freaking out about it.
Like it did build suspense up in a couple moments decently, but the problem is, like for most of us, obviously us and people who are in our age, like we've seen this movie before. I mean, we've seen this movie our entire lives. And this doesn't.
Here's the thing
it's
that
not different.
it appealed to me is that even though it feels like it's in the wheelhouse of Blumhouse films, it has more of an authentic feel to it.
Yeah.
That feels like it is from a certain perspective, and it is not something that was born out of a writer's room thinking, okay, how do we make a scary movie? Let's do this. Let's set up these characters. Let's set up the investigators.
Yeah.
It feels like it's telling a story about a young girl.
Yeah.
And is she in Spain, right?
Yeah,
Is it
yes.
Madrid.
Yeah.
In Spain, and you get to live her life a little bit.
Yeah,
Like you
and-
see her taking care of her kid or her brothers and sisters, and that's what I loved about it. That it felt like from an authentic place and real characters. And this supernatural stuff, where it was also sometimes very much genre-esque, like a creepy nun and stuff, which was almost at odds. Like almost if they would have pulled that back, it could have, I don't know, maybe been more effective in some regards, because that other stuff did feel very genre-heavy. But the actual like human element and characters, I felt way more authentic, I think, than a lot of the ghost house movies we get in America.
Yeah.
And something too, we just need to give some praise to the child actors in this movie.
Oh, yeah, stellar.
because
Good.
they were good. They were super cute kids. They were really good at what they were doing. Like it just
Again,
you didn't
you felt
want
like you were in the room with them.
but
They
you
felt
didn't want
authentic.
like,
Yeah.
you did not want anything to happen to these
Yeah.
kids. You're like they're all they just and I actually felt like a family. That's one thing I had to praise this film for because every bit of that it didn't feel like they're just actors. Like that felt like
when
these
you
were
go
actually
into
siblings.
for me when I go into watching Sinister or Insidious and all that, I'm watching it and obviously they're trying to make you care about this family, but
Yeah.
you feel like these people are just fodder for the scares that are about to happen,
and it is
and
didn't
that's
feel
all
like
they're
that.
there for. This felt like within like 15 minutes of this film, I was engrossed in their lives and what they had to do.
like
with
the
and
little
everything.
boy who like wets the bed. He's like, "I'm not doing it tomorrow." It's just like
Yes.
like when you. But the kid was so authentic, and it's like they really, to me, felt like okay, these just don't feel. They feel like they actually have a
Well, yeah,
connection.
because it gave you the slice of life of what what their day to day life
Yeah.
was, and
And you see
two-
how important the sister is to it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she is, even though there
Veronica.
is the mom, Veronica,
And
the mom's not really there. 'cause she
the
has
other
to
like
work.
another thing they did that I appreciated was they had the lead be a teenage girl that wasn't sexualized in any way.
No, which is
And-
very weird because like if they had done this in America, they would probably would have casted like somebody like Bella Thorne, then had her in a crop top the entire film, and it's like
which was
Yeah.
Amityville 2, or Amityville the Awakening.
there you go. Yeah,
2,
so it's
but-
like this is the difference. He said at no point was she sexualized, which again I think in
It's
America
sad
they would
that,
definitely
like,
do
that's
that.
a thing that is a positive aspect, but in so many of these movies you cast, like you said, or if this was made 10 years ago, you cast like Megan Fox
Yeah.
when she's like 25 as a 17-year-old and have her.
Hey,
and-
Jennifer's Body's a good movie.
I'm just saying, like in the Transformers movies,
Yeah.
you have her wearing essentially like a halter top, like bending over in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, not to denigrate, anybody who does that or people who like it, it's just in movies where you're supposed to have kids that are kids, like not having the camera leer at them.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just like that would have ruined the tone of this movie because she is just kind of the caretaker for these kids because their mom works a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people whose lives probably are like that.
Oh, a lot of people.
I mean, because like growing up, like with like Derek and I, like our mom, when we were growing up as young kids, was stay at home mom until we got old enough. Then she went back out into the workforce. So, and there was only two of us, and then like Sean, you were like an only child, so we don't have the experience of having multiple younger children you have to deal with.
yeah.
But I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people where that was their situation, and just the movie does a great job at getting you into the family. And I think that's what makes some people get so scared by the things that happen in it is you get grounded in these people's lives.
Yeah, you don't want
first.
anything to happen to the kids.
Yeah, it's
like
the
you-
context
yeah.
of it all happening.
The only problem I have with the movie though is like again, this is social media. People building up like this is the scariest movie ever made, and it's like fireworks are shooting off, and people are just like barfing everywhere, and people are. It's like no, this is not that movie.
Well, yeah,
This
'cause-
movie is like every now and then, sporadically, creepy stuff will happen. And my biggest issue with this movie is a lot of times the creepy stuff did not lead anywhere. Like there would be stuff that happened.
Yeah, that's the same stuff in The Conjuring though.
Yeah,
It
and
doesn't get me
and
when
it
it's
aggravates me a
It's
little
just
bit.
like they hit bullet points of like, oh, we need a scare like every 10 minutes. Let's build one. Let's build one.
Yeah.
It's like it is like a ghost house or a haunted
And
house.
I guess
you know,
my issue too is like a lot of this. If you've seen if you've seen Nightmare on Elm Street, or if you've seen a lot of these movies, like the scares they do in this, because like the ghosts that would go through the wall felt very Nightmare on Elm Street to me. Like, so I've seen that.
Somebody said they watched a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street, but there was when I was watching it, there was another film that I felt like it was pulling from, and I
kinda
can't
had-
remember what it was.
It kind of had Amityville horror aspects a little bit too, because like the hands that always come out and stuff like that.
Well, there
It's
was like a Ghostbusters scene where there's a character lays on the bed and all these hands come out and grab
yeah, that's
him.
what. Okay, that's what it is. Ghostbusters. Yeah.
But the thing that with a lot of different movies of this nature that to me just kind of always take me out of it a little bit is there's never really clearly defined rules for what spirits can and can't do. So you don't know, because a lot of times you'll have like a shadow ghost person, not in this movie specifically, just in general, like a shadow ghost person's in the room and then it runs at the person and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things where it's like you build this scare moment up, but if the rule of the world is the living can't kill, or the living can't be killed by the dead, then there's like there's no stakes there, and it's just a scare moment.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because, in this situation, we were talking about maybe the real life story it's based on, like if she had psychological problems or whatever. Like, you think from a filmmaking perspective, the goal is to maybe make you feel like they feel, where even though they're maybe not getting hurt, they are living in constant fear. And that's it's a weird thing to do because the natural inclination is to add in a bunch of scares like that don't lead anywhere. But it's like, I almost feel like there's another way to approach that to where you can feel the creepiness and the uneasiness of the character. You know what I mean? It's a hard thing to put on film if it is just an internal feeling that is not all visual spectacle. But I feel like there is something there to kind of exploring that. But it's just like a hard thing to tackle without doing it in traditional means.
And I think what they did too is the beginning of the movie, and this isn't a spoiler, they tell you the events happen. Like everything leads up to this one day. So you have 3 days this movie covers. And the first scene is the very end scene, which you don't see everything. And then
you just see like a slice.
And then you play into that moment. So you have 3 days. So in the real life, which I did not read up on this, William did, this was over several months. So you give yourself 3 days to accomplish what really took several months. So like Sean was saying, the buildup is not there because it's really hard to build these things up in 3 days when stuff only happens at night when the mom isn't there. Mm-hmm. So, nothing happens to her. It's like in Nightmare on Elm Street, the girl fell asleep at school, Nancy, and you saw that. Nothing like that happens in this. It's only at night at certain times when things happen, and some of the things are really creepy. There's an exact scene out of The Sentinel in this. Getting to that in spoilers. If you've seen Sentinel, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's like the best scene in the movie. But have any of y'all seen The Sentinel?
I have not seen it.
Need to rewatch that.
Anyway, it's like almost just out of that verbatim. But then outside of that, it's like not too much there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the element of it really only taking place over the course of like 3 days, because it'll give you like time cards for like the date and time as time is moving along. I think that this is the type of movie where if you spread it over months, then you take some of the urgency out of it, and you spread it out over more time. Because this one, it gives you like a very finite like endpoint you'll be getting back to.
Yeah.
And then like
you're 3 months away from it. You're
but to me though, I think if you know you're 3 months away from it, then
like,
instead
The Shining is a film that takes place over a large amount of time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's a different type of film.
Yeah, and it's also
and I don't remember exactly how much time passed in the real story. I just remember reading it, and it wasn't literally that something happened with the Ouija board. Then 3 days later, it was like over a period of time.
Yeah,
and like this is a movie though. I mean, obviously, it was like the version of the Ouija board that they sold in Spain in the early 90s, which wasn't the Milton Bradley or whatever game company version we have here. So, like, if you had just swapped out that board they use with one of the branded ones that they made those movies about here in the U.S., that's a better Ouija board movie than definitely the first Ouija board. And then if you compare it to Ouija Origin of Evil, then I think you have an argument there for which one's better. But it's just like and then too, I think engrossing you in like this other culture a little bit and the other time period.
Yeah, it's definitely 90s.
Yeah, it's like 91 or something like that. Yeah,
because like at a point it's like, oh, even though this is set in Spain and not in the U.S., there are parts of this that do feel familiar. Because when I was growing up, everybody loves to fetishize the 80s now, but I was born in 85. So most of the 80s to me are just brief glimpses of memories and specific things.
No, the 90s
up to the age of 5. The 90s are really what I remember. And then parts of this rang true, even though it was set in Spain.
Well, like the one scene that I loved, I think it was when she first takes her little brother. The first time you see her take her to school, and the teacher takes her little brother and walks off. But she's wearing this like jeans and then a really long jean shirt, and it's like, I remember that. Like that's how teachers dress. No, I'm talking about the teacher that took the little brother. Did anybody remember that? It's like this big
little bit, yeah.
And it's like I remember teachers wearing that. Like that is a 1990s teacher outfit.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
It's just funny that's just universal. It didn't matter if you were doing it in Louisville, Kentucky, or Madrid, Spain. They all wore the same stuff. You know, so that's enjoyable. But
I think that just the social media buzz about it. I mean, like for us, obviously going into, I just heard that like I know Sean watched it after hearing the early buzz. And then I went in just knowing that, that Sean didn't hate it and enjoyed it. So I was like, oh, okay. I don't like, because like Julie, as she's mentioned before, like she's somebody that a lot of times doesn't like certain like scary things that do certain things. So she was asking me like, well, because like she watched The Ritual after I had talked about watching it before. So she's asked me for this one, like, oh, do you think I'll be okay to watch it? Just based on how people are talking about it. It's like, I think you'll be fine. Like if you can watch Insidious or The Conjuring.
Oh yeah,
it's not. This is not
for me. It's not actually scary. The thing that I again liked about it was the authenticity of it.
Yeah,
in a horror film, I was like, okay, great. Somebody's grounding a horror film, and it's not just all about making another genre film we've seen a dozen times. Like it does all those same things, but at least there's an element that feels fresh, that makes it feel different than the Blumhouse ones because it is set in Madrid, Spain. It's set in 91, and it's not a fetishized 90s or 80s,
none of this stuff was too outlandish in it. But again, I think I think it being more centered in reality is also what makes it not as effective because like I think
they should have changed the scares
Yeah,
to accommodate the feel of the film, maybe. I don't know. There was something at odds there for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think the only thing I don't like is like when scares can only happen, when the ghosts can only come at this point, at this time. All these things have to be met, and only then can things happen. Because then to me, it's like, then if you just don't do that thing, then this just doesn't happen.
I think the part of the frustration for people like in the movie itself is if she knows the scares only happen at night when it's just her and her younger siblings and her mom's not there, and she knows that's what causes it or when it happens, and she's can't get her mom to work a different shift, and she doesn't have the money to change their physical location and go to a hotel or something. Like knowing that what's going to happen is going to happen and no one listens to you and you can't do anything to prevent it. Yeah. That's where the frustration on the character's part comes in.
I mean, it is about, people and their inability to change bad situations they're in, which is true to real life. You know what I mean? Where it's like they're just stuck.
And then which again is kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street.
I was listening to some podcasts recently that had like a horror like writer director on it, and they're talking about like people are trashing his movie for like the way things happen. It's like, oh, why would you open the door? He's like, but if nobody opens the door, there's no movie. Yeah. Then you just go along about your life, and it's just like a normal, like every day. So I think in the movie, like things have to happen for there to be a movie.
Yeah.
It's just like I think that there was a while where there was like the haunting in or the exorcism of movies, and
mid 2000s,
and this feels kind of in that mold. It's a little bit different.
Like this is definitely, if you ever watch like the Discovery Channel ghost stories or like unsolved mysteries, this is one of those segments. Like you've probably, I would not be unsolved mysteries usually does things centered in America. But like and a Haunting of, which is like a Discovery Channel show, like I feel like you've probably seen this on there. Like you've probably had an episode because they did one that covered like Amityville and all the and like the Haunting in Connecticut and all that.
That's what was cool about it too. It's not one you've seen 1,000 times in a movie.
It's not.
Or like they're even if they're not the literal thing, they're basically taking inspiration from it. This was like what the first supposedly documented supernatural occurrence by a police officer or something in Madrid, in Spain. Yeah. So I mean that's a cool spin on it. It being something that is, based off real, quote unquote, real life events. Like that is a cool thing that we have still one of those films to get in 2018.
Yeah. I just think that there is a lot of cliches in it, like the blind nun, Sentinel, and so much other stuff. Well, I just saw a lot of parallels between this and the Sentinel.
Well, I guess too, before we get into the spoilers, I guess we can just give what our scores are and then move into spoilers. So, giving this a score out of 10. It's kind of tough because like I thought it was a good movie and I thought it was effective for what it did and it would resonate with a lot of audiences. But then you get the immediate backlash because even somebody commented on one of our posts about how they thought it was incredibly boring.
It was.
So I had to give it like a 6 out of 10, like solid, ghost possession, solid ghost type flick. That's not the exact same story we've seen 1,000 times because it's a different setting. Now there's a lot of similarities in this.
I mean, it is the same thing we saw a million times. It's packaged better. It looks cleaner. The acting's pretty. The acting's very
more naturalistic.
It feels very natural. Yeah.
And based on the fact that the director also did Wreck, thank God this wasn't found footage and it was just a narratively told story.
Yeah.
So I think 6. Like if you like these types of movies, is worth checking out. It's
on Netflix.
It's not going to scare you out of your. It's not going to scare you to death.
You're not going to poop your pants like a lot of people claim that.
Yeah, it's no scarier than Insidious or Sinister or The Conjuring or anything like that. It's just
this has a similar plot line to Insidious 3. So or maybe Insidious 3 has a similar plot to this. I don't know because this is based in reality. Insidious 3 is not.
So Derek, what would you give it?
I'm with you. 6 out of 10. Like if it wasn't for the family feel of this and like the realness that gave to me, I think this movie would have been a complete wash. I mean, because like I've seen this movie a lot. I love paranormal stuff. I've watched like The Haunting of and all this stuff. So it's like this story is nothing new to me, but the way that they went about it was really, it was done very well. It just fell flat on a lot of the scares to me because a lot of times they didn't go anywhere. They didn't really matter. This movie, to me, the problem with doing the 3-day thing is like it was a means to an end. Like I think that kind of hurt a little bit on the types of scares they could do. 'Cause
compacted a little bit.
You only get 3 days of it, so and it's like they didn't maximize what they had, and it went from 0 to 100 in my opinion really quick. 3 days is a short amount of time to go from nothing to the end.
Yeah.
So I think that hurt it a little bit. I understand why they did it because it gives you more intimate feel. But yeah, 6 out of 10. I would recommend it if you like. It's on Netflix. You're not going to be out much because you're already paying for it anyway. So if you got Netflix and want to check it out, I definitely recommend it.
Yeah.
I give it probably like a 7 out of 10. Like I definitely recommend it for people that are looking for a horror film on Netflix because there's a lot of bad horror films on that.
This is good.
It's kind of you're kind of thirsty for good ones on that service sometimes.
You're thirsty.
And for me, like I think, okay, yeah, if you have if Netflix is the only thing you've got to watch horror films on, I definitely think check it out if you're a horror fan. But in the same token, like Nicole, she likes horror films, but I watch this alone. It's not one that I've said, hey, you should watch this or let's rewatch this. It's not one I'm going to really rewatch anytime soon at all, or a blanket recommendation to all film goers. But you know, it's just it's a new horror film and it's free to watch if you have Netflix. Like, and I think it is well done. It's not completely my bag, and it's not doesn't blow me away. It's not. I don't think at all it would even come close to topping my top 10 list of the year by the end of the year, unless we have a really bad year. But at the same time, like it was a nice little surprise for them to drop that and it be a quality film, I thought.
Well, too, like for there to be The Ritual, which was obviously like British, and this movie, which was Spanish, that's a good mixture of Heartland America, Blumhouse horror films that are good, that would, do somewhat decent in theaters probably. But yes, now I can move into our spoiler discussion for Veronica. But before that, if you're listening to us via iTunes, you can do a huge favor and leave a review that helps other people find the podcast. You can find all the work we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. You can find links there to all of our social media accounts. So to make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all those. Because like on Instagram, we've been having some stories and sharing pictures of stuff and things we're watching or talking about.
Tinder, Grindr.
Yeah. You can grind on the House by Video Store. But
I watched Love, the two episodes of Love season 3, the most recent one.
Yeah.
And 2 people are swimming in a pool, 2 guys, and a redneck neighbor's like, what is this, Grindr? That's what made me think of that. Yeah. And they're like, what? Like they're just swimming in a pool together.
You can't do that now.
But a lot of symbolism there. But so you can follow all of our social media accounts. And then if you want to follow us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at William Cabs.
You can find me at pretty much everything at Meta World Derek.
I'm at Plevinshond on Tinder, on Twitter.
So now, full spoiler discussion for Veronica. I mean, there's not a ton to talk about.
I mean, we can kind of. For me, I don't have much, so we can get to the next podcast. But
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's just like the very ending.
There's 2 things. There's one thing specifically I want to talk about. For one, she dead. 2, which is disrespectful to say, because she actually dies.
A real person dies.
Yeah, a real person dies. But there's 2. Okay, one thing is quit doing the mouth scene. I'm so tired of the mouth scene.
But if that's
quit
what happened, Derek, what are they supposed to do?
It's not what happened, though. In real life, the only documented paranormal phenomenon was that a picture caught on fire.
Yeah. I don't like the mouth scene. I feel very weird watching a movie with like a 15-year-old girl where things obsessed with getting into her mouth.
Did that as well.
Quit doing that. It's weird. I don't understand it. It's like some type of fetish that these directors have with young girls and opening their mouths really wide and stuff going in.
I think just somebody I don't get it. I think that there's been like studies done that show that people are terrified when there's things happening in people's mouths.
Yeah, but probably it's probably
but stop doing it.
It's weird.
Stop doing it,
especially to young women. Don't do it. Just skip it.
So the one thing that I thought was like, whoa, like I almost didn't expect was when her dad like appears in her room and she's using the flashlight and he's like naked.
Yeah,
like that was like, oh shit.
Here's
I'm like, wait, the movie's rated R, I guess. Like that was a creepy element.
Yeah, here's the problem with that though. If you've seen The Sentinel, the exact same scene happens because in The Sentinel, the woman like lives in the gates of hell. Her dad's dead, and she keeps seeing her dad. And there's one scene where she's in bed at night, and you see something in the corner, and she takes her light and shows it, and it's her dad naked, and he runs across the room. And I was like, oh, this is
that's awesome.
That's where like I watch it, it's like, dude, I've done seen this. Like,
well, then like It Follows even kind of did that with her dad.
Yeah, but like again, like it did work. It was creepy because he's like Veronica, and he walks over. So it is kind of startling, but it's like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it's the exact scene from the
That's a
Sentinel.
bummer when you're just like when you're cherry picking all these things it's made, because then it
Yeah.
just breaks the magic of the film.
And another thing too that's parallel to this, the Sentinel, is you had the blind nun. Sentinel had a blind nun.
Well, I think there's been blind nuns. In a lot
but
of
I'm saying,
stuff.
but
Yeah,
like
blind
to
nun
me,
is a stock
you have two things that
supernatural
come
character.
out of the Sentinel. So you have the naked dad in the room, and then you have the blind nun that's always kind of watching. So it's like you got these two things.
Well,
that are so similar.
I think a lot of it's just a lot of supernatural stories that revolve around Catholicism.
Two things are the same.
Have a lot of the same elements.
Two things. The naked
and everybody
dad.
knows if you masturbate too much, you go blind. So
Yeah.
that's why I was not-
I did like the blind nun in the movie. Like I thought she was going to be like badass blind nun, like kick the door in and do something, but never happened. But
The power
They
of
should
Christ
make a new
compels
Zatoichi
you.
with a blind nun. That would be a cool martial arts film.
But like I like the movie, but I just like some of the biggest moments are like Annihilation kind of had this way, but I'm not going to spoil that. But like you see these moments, and it is a oh shit moment. But the problem is like when you've seen it and it's done, it's like, man, I just wish that you could have went a little bit further on it or something. But then again, in that like where she sees the dad and then the arms come out of the bed and stuff, and it's like
At least that was something visually cool. Even if you've seen it
was.
before,
Yeah.
at least it wasn't just a door shutting and you think something runs by. Like I appreciate it that they went to lengths to make something at least visually cool.
Yeah, it was
even if it's pulled from other films. Like
Well,
I'd rather that than nothing at all.
But
you know?
I can't think of anything more terrifying if you're 15 than to see your dead dad in your corner saying your name naked.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
would be pretty terrifying. And then the siblings in the closet was a good touch too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that wraps up all the discussion.
Yeah, there's not many
I
spoilers.
just want to point out the ending.
Yeah.
That the only thing that really happened was a picture caught on fire.
well, that and this first scene sets up the detective looking at something like in shock, and you hear all these weird gargle noises. And at the end of the movie, it shows you the scene the girl is all like distorted, and her mouth is wide open, and then she dead.
She's in the logo of the Sinister 2
Yeah.
body that is in the 2.
Yeah, and it's like
Opening up with a detective, I was like, oh, I want to watch a Spanish detective film. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I wanted to follow that character. Like, you know,
And then
not that-
he's never
not
has,
that
like,
even
a
had to do
line.
supernatural stuff, but just like I don't know, I just like, ooh, I want to watch some
the other
Spanish.
thing, like when the detective saw the picture catching on fire, it seemed like this big moment we're supposed to be aware of, or it seemed like it was referencing something. Like it built it up to be like this big thing. It's like, oh,
it was
like
nothing.
But yeah, so yeah, that was just want to point out what the thing that actually happened in real life was. But okay, so that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Vesour podcast. The next episode, we'll be discussing Mortal Kombat. Which you can watch on Amazon Prime for free.
Actually, it would just be us sitting on the couch not speaking with just the Mortal Kombat song on loop for like 45 minutes.
Electric coming out of my eyes the whole time.
But that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Vesour podcast. Thanks for listening.